Hey, this is Politics with Laura. I got a good one for you today. Now, I've been making some videos about what's going on what's going on between the Russia and Ukraine, and what does NATO have to do with it. Well, I'm going to unclutter some of this stuff because it seems like that is a little bit of confusion. NATO is part of the Western countries that are more capitalism, and the Warsaw Pact are countries that are communists, socialists and communists. And they got together, each of them, and had an agreement. Now, for the Warsaw Pact, it's considered or called the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance, more commonly referred to as the Warsaw Pact, as a mutual defense treaty between 8 countries. And of course, the Soviet Union. Then you had Czechoslovakia, Hungary. Oh, I have to go back and check. Hold on. They are Albania, Bulgaria, and Romanized Bulgaria, still the same thing. Czech, Slovak, Germany, or German, Hungary, Poland, or Polish, Romanian, Russian, and Romanized Russian, but really all 8. And what they were to do is to come together as countries to ensure what happened back in World War II would not happen again, because, man, that whole area was just decimated. And that was also the reason for the formation of the, what is it called? The NATO countries back in 1949. They had Warsaw and also the NATO. So the NATO is the North Atlantic Trade Organization. So what you find interesting is that after the fall of Soviet Union back in 1991, it collapsed, and the Soviet Union is no longer the Soviet Union, and it's called the Federation of Russia, and it's not communist anymore. But I don't think it's truly capitalism. Maybe a form or a democrat. I'm not going to put any label on it. But even with that, they still had an understanding that, okay, even though that the Soviet Union is no longer here, but we still should at least keep the treaty of friendship. And as Latvia broke apart, Republic of Georgia broke apart, Lithuania, and what really got me was Poland, because Poland was where the pact originated, and it held the power. And now Poland is a part of NATO. I mean, this is really strange. Just, it gets a little weird there. Oh, also Turkey is a part of the Warsaw Pact. So it's really strange what's going on in regards to that. So, having said all that, it leads me into the article. And the article says, Russia aims to reboot former Soviet nations from NATO by relinquishing sovereignty recognition lawmaker. Putin is not playing. NATO took it too far. NATO didn't want Russia in NATO. They're like, well, you're no longer the Soviet Union, and not, I said that before. So Russia, so Putin's like, okay, look, I'm tired. I'm tired of all these games and this foolery and foolishness. It got to stop. Now, its recognition of the independence of the former Soviet nations like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, in attempts to revoke their NATO protection. The State Duma Deputy Yevgeny Fedorov told a Latvia news outlet that reversing Russia's decision to recognize the Baltic states as sovereign would allegedly create a legal ground to force the alliance to divert to the 1997 borders. That's going to change a whole lot right there. So what they were before that, done. It's going to go back to the same Soviet territories before they start breaking off. Ooh, okay, Putin. Wow. Man, Putin, that's rough. Okay, the NATO Charter contains 6 clauses, Clause 6, according to which the disputed territories cannot include the alliance. As long as the territories of the Baltic countries are recognized as disputed, this will become the basis for the exclusion of the Baltic countries from NATO, Fedorov said. Now, the Ukraine Zelensky says arms urgently needed in Russia's supply dwindle. NATO prepares to send more aid. Okay, this adding more fuel to the fire. Oh, NATO, you have taken it too far. Last week, Fedorov introduced legislation targeting Latvia sovereignty and claimed it illegally left the Soviet Union more than 3 decades ago. Lithuania became the first republic to announce it would restore its independence from the collapsing USSR in March 1990 after being under Soviet control since 1940. Moscow, under President Mikhail Gorbachev, acknowledged Lithuania's sovereignty September 1991. Now keep in mind, the acknowledgement, the recognition is important. That's what Zelensky was talking about. Recognize this place, recognize that place. You have to recognize it. Okay, I recognize it. It wasn't just, oh, okay, I recognize it. No, it meant a whole lot. It had a lot of legal standing to it for Putin to say, I recognize. Fedorov claimed that Lithuania was Russia's first NATO target as it posed the greatest threat to Moscow, and claimed that NATO's gateway to the Baltic. Now, wow, Lithuania, I'm not going to go into too much about that because I don't want to get my channel taken down. But Lithuania has a lot of power right there, and I'm just going to leave it as that. That's it. Okay. The commander-in-chief determined that our red lines run along the borders of NATO in 1997. This means that we need at least a minimum to push NATO beyond the borders of the former Soviet Union, he said in reference to the era before Eastern European nations were invited to join the alliance. And once again, keep in mind, just Cuba's 90 miles away from the U.S. and Russia tried to put, or the Soviet Union tried to put missiles in Cuba, and the U.S. was ready to blow everything up. So before we start saying, hey, don't do that, there's history and there's a reason. And hey, defend your borders. We do. U.S. does. Okay. The only nation to join between 1997 and 2004 were Poland, Hungary. The only nations, I'm sorry, that joined between 1997 and 2004 were Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Russia has repeatedly called for them to disarm these nations and move NATO. And move NATO has flatly rejected. Now you see, NATO has something going on, and there's a reason why they keep on inching up and inching up and inching up. Just my opinion. It can, if countries do not pose a threat, then there will not be a change to anything with them. There still will be peace and friendship, the state deputy claimed. Fedorov threatened that should Russia decide to reverse its recognition, the recognition of independent Baltic states, then NATO should boost them from the alliance or accept that a third world war will begin. And that, I believe, just simply my belief, I can't prove it, it's just something that I believe, that maybe NATO is trying to push for that. Why? I don't know. Maybe somebody wants to make some money. I don't know. People make money off of wars. Wars does two things that I'm able to see. Three things: regain territory, boost their economy, and a way of getting rid of additional people. Dare I say that? But in an address Wednesday, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg pledged to bolster security efforts within the alliance and beyond. President Putin's goal goes beyond the Ukraine, and that's the reason why we need to both provide support to the Ukraine as we do, but also strengthen our deterrence to defend, not least in the western part of the alliance, he told the reporter. But, keep in mind that the treaty had a line, because the Soviet Union did not want to go through another World War II. I mean, what Hitler did, he just devastated all those areas right there of his idea of world dominance, and he would have done it. So they just want to just keep that area, just to keep the buffer, but the NATO just keeps on pushing forward. Despite Russia's unveiling threats to NATO allies, experts told Fox News there was no chance Moscow would be able to dictate NATO membership, which is true. First, NATO would not boot any nation out of the alliance. NATO is the result of the treaty, and the Washington Treaty. I gotta look that up. So the only way for a NATO member to leave the alliance is by their own choice. The former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Defense of Europe and NATO, Michael Ryan, said, second, the United States never recognized the incorporation of the Baltic states into the Soviet Union. Oh, interesting. Tit for a tat. Just because Russian Duma members suggest that Russia has not recognized them independent nations, all the members of NATO do. So nothing changes, he added. Touche. Similarly, the former intelligence officer for Russian doctrine and strategy with the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, Rebecca Koffler, told Fox, okay, News that this was another example of Putin using this propaganda machine to scar the people of the Baltic states, to foment discord and ratchet up the tensions with the West. NATO is also, NATO will absolutely not consider kicking out the Baltic. Okay, now what I find interesting, well, the article is really interesting and it went into depth with it, and that's what all this fighting is about. It's about two treaties and ideological ideas, and that's all what they are, is ideological ideas of how they want their countries to be. You have the socialist communists, and then you have the capitalist democratic, whatever you want to put over here. And both want to keep what's here, but NATO keeps on pushing over and over, and because of the Soviet collapse, they weren't able to, say, hey, they were really hurting economically. There was a huge famine. I mean, Russia went through a whole lot when the Soviet Union collapsed. It was terrible. But respect the treaties. And what really gets me is Poland, because Poland holds the key to the Warsaw Pact because they were the powerhouse of it. And now they're a NATO country. Very interesting. Oh man. Coalitions. You have common interests one day, and then you have a different common interest. Makes strange bedfellows. That's all that I'll say on that. But on that note, that's what's going on. If you like my content, like, subscribe. If you don't like it, dislike it, but still dislike it, subscribe, and then tell me why you don't like it. I thank my subscribers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And cheerio.